The other side of the road is safe, where we sidestep being bothered and avoid getting involved. But rolling up your sleeves and boldly going where few dare to tread, that's walking through Samaria. Each week on our podcast, we introduce you to the special few who walk in the spirit of the Good Samaritan. On behalf of the Giving Company and your hosts, David Hendrickson and Dan Riveros, welcome to the Walking Through Samaria podcast. Welcome, everybody, to Walking Through Samaria. I am your host, Dan Riveros, with my co-host,
David Hendrickson.
How we doing, man?
Dan, good to see you.
Good to see you.
You're donning a mask.
We all are. We all are.
We all are. That's true.
Yeah. How you doing?
Except when I'm sipping coffee, then we're sort of abiding by the new California directives. So take your mask off when you sip, but you got to put it back on.
It's like you can walk
after you sip.
You can walk through the restaurant, but once you sit down, it's good. You can take it off. Weird time. Who do we got today, David?
Dan, this is amazing who we have today. And I don't say this lightly, but if anybody wants to go validate on my Facebook page, April 30th of 2018, which was shortly after you and I came back from Ethiopia, I highlighted one of my heroes. No lie. MaryAnn Osborn from World Vision. She is in the house.
Woo! Welcome, MaryAnn.
MaryAnn, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to talk about this, but MaryAnn is the reason that this all started.
Yeah, this is the
we're going to go all the way back to how she chose, where we went to, and we're going to talk about the whole deal.
Yeah, quietly the Kickstarter of this podcast.
Yeah, the catalyst for this podcast is in the recording studio today.
MaryAnn Osborn.
In the flesh. MaryAnn Osborn.
Thank you.
So good to see you.
Likewise. It's wonderful
We're going
to
to talk
here.
about why you were in town, because it wasn't just for this, which is okay. It was for a good reason. Hey, listeners, thank you for tuning into the Walking Through Samaria podcast. I want to give you a brief bio on our very special guest, MaryAnn Osborn. She came in from Florida this weekend, and it's really nice when we have our guests in person because it's so rare these days. We're still doing the COVID thing. There's probably 6 of us in the office today.
Total. Yeah.
Everybody else is working from home under our work from home policy, which is all good. Anyway, to all of our listeners, I am so anxious for you all to get to hear from and get to know MaryAnn Osborn. She works for World Vision, as I mentioned, a Christian humanitarian aid organization on the Partnership Innovation Team. Her focus is developing partnership opportunities aimed at ending extreme poverty. One of her most recent initiatives bridges the gap between student entrepreneurs and developing communities by sourcing market-based solutions to humanitarian challenges. This year's focus is on combating youth drug addiction in Ethiopia. She is passionate about ventures that make dignity a reality for the poor and the vulnerable. Born and raised in Miami, Florida, she has worked for World Vision for the last 9 years and has been blessed to catch glimpses of the incredible stories God is writing all over the world. She is married to her best friend, Sean. I've met Sean a number of times. Great guy. Mom to 2 boys, Gabriel and Dominic, and the owner of one poorly trained 6-year-old dog named Addison.
Nice.
Where did the name Addison come from for the dog?
It was the only time we used a baby book, and it was at the beginning.
Good answer.
There you go. There you go. Well, it is great to have you again, MaryAnn. And the reason we talk about Good Samaritans and walking through Samaria is because of Dan and I's experience in Ethiopia with MaryAnn at the Interfaith Forum, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. Our listeners have heard this story a few times. We had Dr. Norman on a while ago, and we always talk about really what was the catalyst for these kinds of discussions where people act like Good Samaritans, not in the way that you might read about if you Google Good Samaritan, people doing good deeds, but people doing good deeds for others that are not like themselves. Mm-hmm. And just like the Luke 10 parable. But before we talk about that, you are back in Florida. You did a stint in Seattle in Federal Way. You were living south of the city, I think, but you have made your way back to somewhat home, South Florida. You're close to Jacksonville now and St. John's. You grew up in Miami. Can you maybe give us a little glimpse into MaryAnn's life growing up in South Florida?
Sure. It was maybe less traditional than some, but not as exotic as others. Working for World Vision, sometimes people ask me, "Oh, you must travel a lot," and I really wish that I could claim that. But because I work for an organization where people travel so much more than I do, and all over the world. I can't complain, and that's very frustrating sometimes. I love to complain. But growing up in Miami, I have 3 siblings. My dad worked 6 days a week as a diesel mechanic all his life, and my mom decided to do this insane thing and homeschool the 4 of us. And I don't know how she made it out alive, but the investment wasn't lost on us. And Miami was an interesting place to grow up retrospectively. I thought everything was normal growing up there, and it wasn't until I moved out of Miami, out of the city, that I realized it may not be normal for other parts of the country. And when I thought back about our street, I realized just how diverse it was without ever appreciating it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so cool. And no one ever said anything about it. No one made a thing about it. But every house on that street was, we had Jewish families and Cuban families and Puerto Rican families and Chinese families and African American families and an elderly lady that we helped because she couldn't find her house one day. And my mom kind of did everything the way that she didn't have any roadmap for the things we were doing. Like at that time, I remember one year homeschooling was on the chopping block, at the legislature. And so she put her, that was hard stewardship. That was hard stewardship to raise us that way. And she did things like take us out of our community church nearby and drive us down to downtown Miami to go to church in a very, very different environment. I think she felt closer to God there for some reason, but it helped open our eyes to different people, different experiences. And looking back, while it was very uncomfortable living it, I appreciate it all the more now.
Yeah. How about that?
Yeah.
Where are the siblings now? Are they still in Florida like you, or?
Some are. My brother moved kind of to the Northeast, which is why I needed to move back. No. They're doing well and doing their thing, and it's
that's awesome.
It's good. Yeah.
So somewhere along the line, you worked for Family Christian?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, this is an amazing story. So our listeners are going to love hearing that you worked at Family Christian. That's another sort of beginning, right, for this organization. Giving Company really rose out of the Family Christian organization, and you worked at a store.
I did. And I wish it was a more epic story, but it's a human story. So my mom wanted me to get a job. I needed a job. I was 16, and I went and applied at a couple stores where I knew I could sell their products well. For example, I was the springboard platform diver in JO level for years with incredible coaches.
Wow.
And I wasn't that great, but the team was unbelievable. And so I knew like Speedo swimwear, and I knew everything about it.
Yep.
And I went to the store and I told them, like, look, I know your products. And they said, I'm sorry, we can't hire you. You're not 18. And so I got a little depressed, and my mom ended up calling the local Family Christian store and just basically asking the manager to hire her poor, pathetic 16-year-old daughter. And she got me the interview, and I was like, well, I guess I'll go. No one else will talk to me. And John Lewick was the store manager there, and he hired me at 16. I couldn't even type because I was homeschooled, right? We didn't have a computer, so I couldn't even type, and I'm there trying to learn all the book codes and learn everything. And I worked for them in total about 10 years. I ended up managing that store.
Amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
Wow.
And that place became my family when my own family was going through some really bad times. And John specifically became sort of a second father figure to me at that time. He intentionally invested in me. He would lend me his dog-eared leadership books, and once a quarter we'd go over to the little restaurant next door and he'd talk to me about leadership, and it was one of the biggest influences in my life. And I text him every Thanksgiving to say thank you. But I ended up managing that store for a number of years. He became district manager, and then Family Christian partnered with a little organization called World Vision.
Yeah.
And I became a sponsor and started talking about child sponsorship. And and then it kind of keeps going from there. But it it was an incredible place for God to have me for that long, and the Christian influence and the customers in South Florida were so much fun. And being surrounded by a family like that, they really were.
That's awesome. I didn't realize it was 10 years.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
So that led you to World Vision.
It did.
As a sponsor. So how has the role and focus changed? I mean, it's 9 years that you're there now, right?
Yes, 9 years this month. So, my life actually began to change on the walk between immigration and customs in Bush International Airport.
Ooh, okay. Tell us about that.
Dag.
Yeah. I zeroed it in finally. I was like, where was this? And I remember that walk, and it was a moment coming. I had gotten back. I had a bag full of dirty laundry, a heavy heart, and no idea what to do about it. And I had just gotten back from my first missions trip that Family Christian paid for through the James Fund with Back-to-Back in Monterrey, Mexico with Beth and Todd.
Yeah.
And I remember getting off the plane, and I was fine in country. I was having the time of my life being there in country, but it was the cold water shock of coming back into the United States and seeing it like I'd never seen it before.
Yeah.
The expansive floors in the airport, I couldn't even count how many Starbucks I passed along the way. And what was happening in that moment was, the things I thought I knew and the things I was beginning to understand were clashing. And when that happens, you have worldviews struggling, to find their place. And I wish I could say that I, knew what to do right away, but it was hard. It was a hard couple of years. And I had been a child sponsor through World Vision before, and I had done some stuff with the James Fund, but I didn't really get involved until I thought God was speaking to me. Clearly, I found out later it was sort of an email marketing campaign World Vision did. I'm very simple.
We're very supportive of those digital marketing strategies here at Giving Company. But God was in it, certainly.
Yeah, amen.
Yeah, right?
He does show up for work. I got an email about looking for volunteers for World Vision, and I was like, I should probably do that. And then I got another one, and I thought, well, if I got another one, then I should probably really do it. And I finally answered the email. But the change happened for me between what I had seen, which was focused on orphan care, and that's absolutely important and critical, to World Vision, more dramatically when I realized the difference. And both types of organizations are absolutely necessary. And my heart was broken for kids living in poverty who had also lost their parents because of poverty often. And so that's all I wanted to focus on, the most vulnerable in my mind. And it wasn't until I realized that the work that World Vision does actually prevents kids from becoming orphans in the first place. And at that point, I thought, this is where I need to be and what I need to be doing. Yeah. And so I've been so blessed that they let me stick around for 9 years to see what God's up to.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So when I met you, Family Christian was still around. Christian retail, our listeners know, I think everybody on the planet knows, has been hit hard by a number of factors. And Family Christian ultimately went into bankruptcy and then liquidated. Lifeway has liquidated. Christian publishing is still very important and I think a growing business. But Christian retail has been hit hard. But when I met you, Family Christian was still around. Chuck Bengochia, my friend, and I flew out to Seattle to meet you. And we were in the midst of this water program, and I'm going to give a little bit of a commercial to our listeners. One, to maybe encourage your participation, but two, to really understand the impact that this has. So that must have been in 2016,
Sounds
thinking.
about right, yeah.
I'm thinking. And we had created a situation where anybody who is a giving member, for our listeners, you can go to givingmembers.com and learn more about it. You can also go to idisciple.org and learn about it. You can go to christiancinema.com and learn about it. But it is a subscription for $24.99 a year. You get a number of benefits that include free movie rentals, free ebooks, discounts on published products. But from that subscription, we take a portion, and we donate it to WASH. And I'm going to have you describe a little bit about the scope of WASH in a second. And we've been doing this since July of 2015. You took over the program about a year later, may have been in the fall, a little bit more than a year later. As of today, Dan, I got it right here on a piece of paper. We have donated $325,000 to World Vision WASH, which means on the dot, 6,500 people in largely sub-Saharan Africa is where our money goes, now have clean water for life.
That's awesome.
Unbelievable.
6,500.
It's unbelievable.
So to those of our listeners that are subscribers, are giving members, I cannot thank you enough. Dan cannot thank you enough. Marianne cannot thank you enough. The impact is just astounding. For those of you that aren't, we'd love to have you, take a look at it, because it really is a great opportunity for you. It's a great service, but there's also great work that is happening. So we've been partnered on this, Marianne, from that time in 2016 till you broke up with us to go do work with schools. When did you break up with us?
Oh, gosh. I blocked it from my memory. That's why I'm here now.
Maybe a year ago. Anyway, but we stay very connected to Marianne for all the work that she's doing. Talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about what WASH means, what it does, and how it changes everything for villages that have clean water and sanitation and hygiene.
Amen. Yeah. WASH is one of the most impacting things that we can do in a community, with a community. And so it stands for water, sanitation, and hygiene. So you just take the W and the A, and then you have the sanitation and hygiene. It took me a while to figure that out.
It took us a while, I know, to figure that out as well.
But we've found that when you can bring water into a community, you're cutting the death rate in half. And then when you couple that with sanitation and hygiene, it just is a multiplying effect. And this very simple thing that we have abundance, in abundance here for the most part, is a game changer.
Yeah.
It's a game changer, especially for girls and women around the world who spend hours every day chained to a dirty river, for water that often makes them sick. It means that kids miss out on their education, or it's shortchanged. They get a bit of it. And lives and generations are impacted because of something that's seemingly very simple.
Yeah.
And so unlocking that potential for children, families, and communities around the world is one of the most impacting things that you can do.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. So thank you.
I think one of the things that has impacted me significantly is the burden of water. If there's not a well, and if there's not availability to the village at a water point, or maybe even in the home, I think sometimes World Vision is able to bring water into the home. Mm-hmm. The burden in the underserved community falls on women and children. Mm-hmm. The children get sick. The women have to go for hours a day to some dirty water source and haul it back, sometimes more than once a day. And the girls will have to help. They can't go to school. It's devastating, and the burden is on, the most vulnerable, mm-hmm. women and kids, and so the change that is incredibly dynamic goes right at the most vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely, and what God's doing through World Vision is so cool to watch. So at this point, and the stats may change soon because they keep getting better, which is beautiful, but yep. World Vision reaches a new person with clean water every 10 seconds and 3 new schools a day with sanitation and hygiene facilities. And so there's just this beautiful ripple effect of unlocked potential in communities, and it's powerful. When we were in Ethiopia, one of the most poignant moments for me was seeing an area where clean water had not come yet.
It's the worst.
And I've seen photos, right, of this. I've seen photos of dirty water sources, but it was the audio. The first time I heard it, it was the first time I heard all of the sick kids around us.
Yeah. The coughing, the sneeze, the sniffles. It's audio. That's very well said.
Yeah. So it was powerful to step into that picture and to go, okay, God, we're gonna be faithful. We're gonna keep going here, and we're gonna watch you move. Yeah.
I want to speak into a second a little bit of the soul shaking experience that you talked about at Bush International, coming back from Monterey with Back to Back, and we had Beth Guckenberger on this podcast a few months ago. When I got back from Ethiopia most recently, I sat down with 2 of the people I was on the trip with, and they said, "Has anything changed?" And I could tell they were probing. And I said, "Everything's changed." And I know our listeners are going to get tired of me saying this, Dan, but my view of faith, and I was a bit of a snob. I'm going to be honest, a snobby Christian. Yeah. I wanted to go to the biggest church where they had the best teaching, the best music, the best facilities, and if you sort of trace my path from Chicago to Dallas to Seattle to Atlanta, there's no shortage of choices here in Atlanta or Dallas for that matter. That's where I wanted to be. And I've come back from a couple of trips to Ethiopia now saying, man, did I have it wrong. My faith, our faith, the Christian faith, according to the parable of the Good Samaritan, Luke chapter 10 and many other places, is about how well you can serve those in need and how well you can love people that are not like you. And, I again don't say this lightly, but without that trip to Ethiopia, I would still have it wrong. I would absolutely have it wrong. And Rhonda and I, just our conversations have changed. Our giving has probably changed a little bit, although we were big supporters of World Vision back then and continue to be. So I want to hear from you, if you don't mind, because I've never asked you this. A couple years later, we went in 2018, so it must have been in the summer of 2017. We have our normal meetings out in Seattle, which are super fun. And you said, David, I think it's time for you and some members of your team to go on a vision trip, to go to the field. That's, I think, the way World Vision people talk about it. And you said, I think we should go to Ethiopia. Can you maybe talk about what was on your mind or on your heart when you suggested Ethiopia to us? Why Ethiopia?
There are a number of things we look for whenever we consider where we might go and what we might do. But to be perfectly honest, it was one morning before work. I was just getting ready for work and thinking about the partnerships that I have, and it just sort of came to me. It was just I'm going to say that, God was like, hey, kind of a nudging, like, imagine if. It was a question. What could be if we do this? Ethiopia, there are countries on my bucket list I have not found a good excuse to go to, right? I just can't justify it.
Yeah,
I'm like, come on, God, I really want to see India.
That's so funny.
9 years, there are countries out there that I pray that one day I get to see or I'm blessed to see. It's a huge privilege. But Ethiopia, I'd read about, but it wasn't on the top of the bucket list at the time. But it just felt like the place we needed to go, the people we needed to see, and World Vision's water sanitation and hygiene work there, what God is doing through the organization is quite substantial. There's a lot of USAID grant money in there as well, and the impact of both the American people and Christian NGOs in that space. In an area like Ethiopia, you get great stories when you start to converge them like you do there. So I thought, let's go see.
Yeah. So that trip was probably my second big experience with Christian faith. My first one was starting here at the company. I didn't grow up in the church. None of my friends were church people, like none of that. And it was just awesome to see how caring it was for everyone. Like it wasn't, I know it was a Christian thing, but it was a human thing at that point. There was people from every different faith there working together to help people. So that was like, I've heard of those kind of things before, but I saw it. It was really just good. Mm-hmm. So that was,
I love that.
That was my biggest takeaway from it.
As a donor and a volunteer first, and a staff member, third, I still go into it from that perspective myself. And there's, at least for me, where God has me, something strikingly unique and different about the orange thread that runs through everything, if you will, the way God is changing the world in this particular channel. And I have not seen Christians of so many different denominations and so many different faith groups, and even, with the communities we work with, different religions themselves. Come together in this spirit. I haven't found it at other churches. I haven't found it anywhere else. It's a different kind of community, and you can kind of land in any airport and it's the same. It's the same thing. It's beautiful to see. It's beautiful to experience.
Yeah. So Dan was sort of, the highlight of our experience with the Interfaith Forum, which was the catalyst for this podcast. I mean, it was, and so I want you two to talk about the experience a little bit. So I'm trying to remember our itinerary, but I believe we had a meeting at the office, and we met the team at World Vision in Addis.
Right.
I guess right is where the country office is, right? Eddie Brown and Mesrach and the team are there. We saw a community without clean water, which is gut-wrenching. I mean, it's really, really tough, but it makes you celebrate seeing, the villages that did have clean water. So I think we saw one that afternoon. Yep. And then the next morning we get on a plane and we go to Mekelle, and we go to a smaller office, still a World Vision office, I believe. And we are thrust, I make that sound bad. It wasn't bad at all. We are put into a meeting of the Interfaith Forum, the faith-based forum, which is a group of Christian leaders and Muslim leaders. And the Christian leaders, to your point, are of different. There's a kind of an evangelical component, and then there's an Orthodox component to the Christian church in Ethiopia. And we're sitting in a room with all these people. And I'm looking around like, I don't think this happens in the U.S. very much, and maybe it does, through folks like World Vision and other good organizations. So, Dan, you get the honor of cutting the bread, which is an Ethiopian custom. Yeah. And we're all drinking espresso, but you cut the bread with a Muslim leader and a Christian leader. What was going through your mind at that time during that experience?
I liked it. I like those kind of situations. It was kind of cool, like showed up with a group of white folks, like everybody looked different. Then they picked me, like the Latin cat with like the tattoos, and I was the only one in there looking like me, and I was like, "You sure you want me to do this, bro?" Like, all right, I'll do it. But it was cool, I like that when you can just get like put all the other stuff to the side and just like, yeah, man, we're all human beings. Like, let's work, let's do it. So it was beautiful. It was beautiful. Top 3 experiences traveling for sure. For sure. Definitely one of the most unique. Like you said, it's kind of hard to see that here. You really don't even see it here. Right. Now more than ever. So.
Had you been to an Interfaith Forum experience? That was your first.
That was my first.
What was going through your spirit?
And if how often does that happen?
Anywhere our interfaith work is going on, they're bringing these groups together regularly for their regular meetings. And like one of the most, one of the pieces that stands out to me is the part where they said, and maybe we're getting to this, but, this is about our kids in our community. And there's this beautiful sense of, right, we all live here and we share this and we are connected in this way. We aren't, separated by XYZ, but let's come together on this common denominator of our kids. And in being in relationship, God can do incredible things from there. And if we truly believe, that the gospel is the living word of God and the truth, it will continue to wash over. And that was a beautiful thing to see them coming together around something that they all groups care about. And then begs the question, how are we doing that here? What are we doing here for our kids in our communities?
Yeah, it's wild because it's like in some ways they're struggling so far behind, with cleanliness, water, and stuff like that. But then in another way, they're like a million miles ahead of us with that.
Yeah. And when life gets even harder, what we found is you're not going to see differences and divisions. You're going to come together because those are your neighbors. Those are your friends. They're your brothers and sisters. I think some of the before and after of the tragedy of Rwanda, there are some powerful stories there. Next trip. Trip.
Would love to do it. We're in.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough, and I think Marianne helped set this up with Mesrach. I was able to interview a number of participants in that forum after we got back. And it gets ridiculous. I mean, and again, that's a good term. That's my millennial term, right, Dan? So a couple things. And listeners, I know I sound preachy, but I think sometimes Christians might cringe a little bit, right? And go, well, what do you mean we're interacting with people that don't believe in the deity of Christ? And let me just paint a picture from Luke chapter 10, from the parable. The hero of the story is a Samaritan. Jesus told the parable. The hero is a Samaritan. At that time, Jesus was a Jew. The Jews and Samaritans were religiously, politically, ethnically, racially, socially at odds with one another. There wasn't, if you were to ask the Jewish people, were the Romans worse or the Samaritans, you might get different answers to that question. And so if Jesus can tell a parable where the two religious guys pass by, the priest passed by, the Levite passed by, but the Samaritan does not. The Samaritan cares for the beaten and robbed Jewish person, puts him in an inn, pays the innkeeper and says, I'm coming back, returns to make sure this person is taken care of. To me, that is an opening of the door to all of us, but to this interfaith forum. And the second thing is, to your point, they had a purpose. And that purpose was, can't we come together for child protection, for eliminating child marriages, and for trying to reduce divorce, trying to reduce broken homes. And I thought, isn't that sort of it? Like when you get a common endeavor, you talk about Rwanda, boy, a lot of those seemingly human walls come down in a hurry.
Amen. Yep. Amen.
And they go to each other's birthday parties. Yeah. The thing that I heard on the interview, which blew me away, was Christians are helping rebuild mosques. Muslims are helping rebuild Sunday schools or build Sunday schools. And I'm like, this is straight out of the parable. Like, it's not blasphemous, right? Like, it's straight out of Luke chapter 10.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I want to talk about poverty, and you in your bio and me knowing you for as long as I have, which is going on 5 years. You have a passion for working to help eradicate extreme poverty around the world. I'm always wordy with these introductions to questions, but you gave me a book, Walking with the Poor, from Bryant Myers. You've given me 2 incredibly impactful books in the time I've known you. Dangerous Love from Dr. Ray Norman, which we've talked about on a previous podcast, and Walking with the Poor. And I remember your words when you gave me this book, and you said, David, a lot of the research shows that poverty arises out of broken relationships. Mm-hmm. Can you maybe unpack that statement a little bit?
Absolutely. Yes. I can geek out on this stuff. But because it's so cool and it's about people and it's about what God is doing. And this book, I have to confess, someone gave it to me. And obviously, if you work in World Vision, there are books all over the place. They're just laying around, right? And there's this years of research and insight and wisdom that God's poured in that you just have to pick it up and read it. So you don't have to go to Ethiopia. But I didn't pick the book up for, 6 years of being at World Vision because it's kind of like
on the shelf.
Textbook.
Yeah, it is. It's
heavy.
It is. Yes.
Intro in chapter 1, and you're like, you got a million tabs open on Google, and you're like, where am I reading the Communist Manifesto now? Okay, what's going on?
Yeah.
Yes, but I do remember at New Employee Orientation at World Vision, when they gave World Vision's definition of poverty, and it's a sentence or two, but the keystone phrase in it is broken relationships. And our friend Steve Haas likes to say, it's fascinating. If you ask a room full of people what poverty is, you're going to get about as many different answers. People are going to tell you it's the 1%, it's the man, or, oh, no, it's not that. It's the poor. They're lazy. They follow bad leaders. They make bad choices. Or others are going to tell you, oh, no, it's the system. It's all these things. And the truth is, sure, with an issue that strikes every nation on the planet, the reasons are as broad as they are deep. But at the center of it all, we have found, quite simply, that it is broken relationships between people and God. The God we know as Christians, between people and God, between humans and their understanding as made in God's image, right? Their own identity, between us and our family members, between us and our neighbors, right? Who are our neighbors? Between citizens and governments, and even our stewardship of creation, our care for the world. And if you trace an issue back far enough, you're going to find those breaks. And so Steve likes to say, quite simply, as World Vision, our job is to help mend those fissures. And that's where you see the Holy Spirit moving. And so it can sound very technical. It can sound like water wells, and it can sound like, rebuilding schools. But man, you think about it in your own life, and like he says, you replay that internal memory tape. Some of the worst moments in our lives probably center on a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, that's everything.
Yeah. How about that? I remember in Ethiopia, and we got to meet the farmer. And that's, an understatement of sort of this guy, right? But speaking to relationships, he didn't just create a successful venture for him and his family. He created a successful venture for the community. Mm-hmm. And then he took it as an opportunity to build into young men. And that was such a meaningful moment to me, because you can get kind of wrapped up in the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Jack Dorseys and all that who are building these incredible wealthy ventures. Mm-hmm. And yet what needs to come out of any successful venture is better relationships, is building into people, is developing the next generation of leaders and innovators and people who are making a difference. Like, that's what it's about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think as Christians, we can do a couple different things. We put charity in a bucket over here, and that's different from career, and that's different from church, and that's different from education. And what God wants is that holistic self. He wants stewardship of all of those areas, that we would work through our careers wherever we're called. That's any industry. You don't have to work for an NGO. You don't have to work for, the local church. You can be anywhere and be that Christian influence and that mender of relationships. And you can look out for the most vulnerable in the products you buy and the decisions you make and the policies you write. And we are remiss if we think that it does not extend to that. And we should really take a good hard look at how we live our lives in those spaces, because I think we're kind of the plan, right? Like Jesus left. I was like, here you go. We got the Great Commission and the Great Commandment, and we're all like, when are you going to help them, God? I think we're kind of the plan, and I think he gave us what we need to do it.
Yeah, that's so well said. Give us, you've been around. So if you don't mind, we've talked about Ethiopia, and Dan and I talk about it every time we're on this podcast. I mean, it was just such a meaningful experience for us. You've talked about some of the places you've been and some of the things that you've seen, right? Oh, the places we'll go, the things that we'll see, the things that we'll do. Talk just your 9 years at World Vision, maybe some highlights of work and impact that you've seen.
Oh man, it's unbelievable to have a window into what God's doing, because it's powerful. I've been blessed to travel to South America, Central America multiple times. I got to go to Cambodia, and then I've been to Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, Kenya twice, and places like Ecuador and Peru. And I've still got more to go. There's more places to see. I think I'm odd. Most people will tell you incredible stories of women and what women and girls are accomplishing around the world, and they're doing some amazing things. You invest in a girl. I mean, there's research on it. You invest in a girl, you invest in a woman, and the community, it's exponential, the impact that they have. But for me, I am always, I just sit in these moments where I see men who are working hard. I guess because it can be a bit unusual. I think with roles and responsibilities in our lives, there's an expectation that men are the breadwinners, they are the providers, they are the protectors. They are Joseph to Mary and Jesus, and that's heavy. And it's a very heavy thing to carry. As a woman, sometimes I'm like, well, I'm the underdog, so no one's going to expect me to manage this. And if I can pull it off, hey, great. But I remember one, and I still. It's a shame. I haven't learned how to tell this story right. Whatever God wants me to do with it, I'll have to come back for another episode. But
Perfect.
we were in South America, and there was a gentleman named Umberto, and he was the last guy we went to see. Way out, 4 hours out, far from anything or anyone. And we went to see him because he was the head of their little prenatal health clinic out in the middle of nowhere. And we get there, and he's this little guy, and his hands are worn. He works construction. And what we found out is that in that community, there wasn't enough work to go around, so the men actually took voluntary layoffs and traded the job so that everyone could work, everyone could have some work to do. And in his spare time, he ran this health clinic for moms, and he showed us his map, and World Vision teaches people to do this, in their clinics, these volunteers. He's a volunteer. He had this map of his entire village, and he had all the kids charted on it with smiley faces, red, yellow, and green, based on their health and their weight. And he ran this facility, and they had early childhood development classes, and he did maternal child health, nutrition. But he was so discouraged. He worked so hard, and he said he tried to get some of his friends and other men to come and help because he was putting in so many hours. But he's like, they never stay. And at the end, he's like, maybe I'll ask some women. And we were like, yeah, maybe you might want to try that.
Yes.
But he was so passionate about it, and he felt such a sense of responsibility. And what was hard for me at that time was his own daughter. He had one daughter, and I think she had been about 9 years old, but she had died of cancer. And he said by the time they got her to the national hospital in the capital, her body was just riddled with tumors. And the struggle of being someone who's a healer, being someone who's not a doctor. Like, I wonder who he would be if he had been born somewhere else, and what he would have done and accomplished. But I think the impact, would be equitable, just a different kind of a scale, if you will, because he was healing that community. And yet he lost his own daughter, and he was struggling forward. And I think about faith like that. I think maybe that's where I'm still stuck on this point. And of the martyrs, this joy to die in the Colosseum for God, for Christ, to show how much we love him. It's that gritty, hard faith of struggling forward even when we're exhausted. That there's something there, and I still don't have it figured out.
That's good.
So
touching on what you said, what he would have been if he was born somewhere else. David says it all the time: proximity matters.
Yeah,
it's like
an accident of latitude. Rich says.
That's good. That's good. It's
crazy.
Yeah, it really is. When you stop and think, when you've seen tough, and you just go. My first vision trip with World Vision was to Honduras. With Amy Thompson and Johnny Lopez and the team. And we went, World Vision does this, right? They make sure that you see the situation without clean water and early in the trip, right? Because it just grabs you. And I took a picture, I think it's on my Facebook page, of a little boy in the dirty river, the dirty stream. And he gives me a look as I'm taking his picture. And I'm convinced what was going through his mind is, why am I the one standing in the stream? And why are you the one behind the iPhone?
Yeah.
I was absolutely convinced that that's what he was telling me through his eyes. And it just wrecks you.
Dan, what you were saying about how it can seem, right, there's material poverty that we haven't seen before, that we see. But then conversely, there's a spiritual wealth that we don't have. And so when we talk about poverty, we talk about social, physical, spiritual, mental forms of brokenness, and recognizing that there are communities around the world, even where Umberto is, like his impact there. I'm just talking about if he had been born somewhere else, the scale, it would be easier for me to wrap my mind around the impact he was having there. Thank God he is where he is, and being that person to his community. But when we look at social, physical, spiritual poverty, oh my gosh, where are the areas where we are desperately lacking? And they have so much. I got back from Uganda, oh gosh, when was that? A year ago or so. And I always struggle when I come back to the States, reconciling everything. Yeah. And this time I was like, what is it? What is this? And I realized we don't have community here like they do. They work together. Yeah. They have to. Yep. And they have to rely more on God. And I was like, well, what is community, right? So I wanted this little quest. And I was Googling it, and it turns out that anthropologists really don't know. They have a couple different definitions. So after digging back through Meyer's book again, I finally came to this realization that community is quite simply the convergence of our stories. And God writes these stories and weaves them together, and we are supposed to be in community. He said it's not good for us to be alone. We are supposed to experience the food that so-and-so makes at their business and the education as taught through XYZ teacher, And so if it is the convergence of stories, God can write these stories however he so chooses, with whomever he wants. And we need to be attentive to who that is, because we don't get to choose who our neighbor is. And recognizing those moments, I think, and being in that posture is really important.
That's good.
So tell us, so I tongue-in-cheek said you broke up with us a while ago, but you took on a new challenge at World Vision. It's been a little while now, but can you tell our listeners what you're up to now? Because it's a pretty cool initiative.
It is. It's really fun, actually. So I work on it's new partnerships and innovation, and we're looking for neat ways to help be in a place to write stories here. What is God going to do, and who's he going to use? And so the first thing our team is working on is a partnership in the education space, in the K through 12 space, and it's called World Vision Ignite. And it is to help schools develop global leaders with a biblical worldview, which is pretty much core to every Christian school's mission statement. If you look at it, it's always got a couple of those words. And what World Vision has found, having worked, in about 100 countries with kids and communities for 70 years now, it takes 3 things to empower youth. And we use these 3 things in the field with child protection clubs and advocacy groups. And there are kids with way less than we have making impacts in their communities right now. And so we found that this Ignite, World Vision Ignite, is what the partnership is called. And it's grounded in relationship, again, because if poverty is broken relationship, then we have to be there. So we pair up students here with kids in communities around the world through child sponsorship. And then there is an education component to it. But what I love about this is this isn't facts on poverty. This isn't to send your student home in tears or to make them feel, ashamed of what they have. Like Paul said, I've learned the secret of living hungry and having abundance, right? So our education is designed to teach them the principles and practices of transformation so that they can do something with it now. And this is where my mom's like avant-garde homeschool thing comes in. I am tired of people looking at high school students, especially middle school students, and thinking, when you finish college, once you get a career, then you can do something impacting. There's this, I don't know what to call it, but there's this posture of sitting in practice. Yeah. We're going to build something and we're going to, write a report. Write the report and send it to the mayor, and ask for action. And so the third thing is engagements, meaningful engagement. So we've got this K through 5 curriculum, and at the end of the year, they are supposed to do a project that impacts their local community, their own backyard, using these same principles and practices. So it's designed to move your students from raising money for the canned food drive to asking why people are hungry and working on that. Wow. And so So
they're getting involved in their communities.
Yes. And they're starting this year. COVID kind of hampered us this last year here, but one of the ways we can help them do that internationally, if they so choose, we have a couple of options for them to engage in, is our Social Innovation Challenge. But the curriculum is designed for them to do something in their own backyard, to bring together Muslim leaders and Christian leaders, or to get to know their local elected officials. When Mother Teresa said, love your neighbor. Do you know who they are? Yeah. Do you know your neighbor? Yeah. Do you know your representatives? And not just their names. Let's start there. But have you ever sent them a Christmas card? Have you ever told them you're praying for them? Mm. Have you ever sent them an email and just said, hey, I know this is a tough time, and begin to develop a relationship where you have influence? I've heard leaders, heads of schools, I won't say which, say, well, not all students are leaders. This is great for leaders. And I almost fell down. Leadership is quite simply influence. And if you believe that your students will not have influence in the world, in their lives, in their careers, then what are we doing here? Yeah. What are we doing here?
Yeah. Well, and I feel to some extent, and this is going to be maybe unfair, but I feel like the older adults they get more cynical. And you kind of forget. And I don't know if it's job things or money things or political policy things or whatever. But I feel like if you look at the younger, let's just call it the younger generation, I would say that this was how I was when I was younger. More inclusive, more time to be involved with a cause, less cynical, like more optimistic and thinking I can really make a difference. I can really have an impact. So if we're not engaging our middle schoolers and high schoolers, what a missed opportunity.
Yes.
Because it's a little bit of a different perspective. And, when you think about the seed sown along the path, and as it grows, the weeds and the plants grow up with it, these life issues, these things that make us cynical, there's a better harvest opportunity with youth, I believe.
Well, and even if there weren't, we gotta try, right?
Yeah, right.
You know, so
there's a lot of them.
Oh my gosh, I was running through an airport. Apparently, my life has a lot to do with airports. I was running through an airport to get to a gate. I don't even know what airport it was, and somehow on the moving sidewalk, while I was dodging people, I passed like a Hudson News or something, and on the wall they had magazines lined up, and they had the same one all the way down, and it was a striking cover, and it was the MIT Tech Review. And it had Buzz Aldrin's picture on it. And it said, "You promised me colonies on Mars. Instead, I got Facebook." What if our greatest minds weren't focused on getting people to click ads?
Yeah.
And what if our future leaders and politicians weren't currently obsessed with Instagram and TikTok? And what if we could help unlock the muted passion, because it's there, in youth to change the world now? And people say, well, that's nice, but how do you do that? Well, I was a bit overwhelmed myself. World Vision actually has a social innovation challenge that was run out of World Vision Canada for a couple of years. And so we have adopted it for our U.S. students, part of Ignite. And they spend a year studying a challenge. This year it's in Ethiopia. And the challenge question that's sourced by the community. This isn't hero entrepreneurship. This is the community saying, hey, we've got this issue, and we want to open it up to the world for a globally sourced, market-based, we want it to be a market-based solution to this problem. And so it's a co-curated challenge. And this year it's how might we combat youth addiction through recreation. And so we kick this out to our students, and they educate themselves on it. They watch some webinars, they get some coaching, and then they propose a solution. That proposal goes back to the field, and they mark it up. Okay, here you're trying to use a motorcycle or a truck. You need a motorcycle. Comes back to them, and then the winning team actually gets to field test their solution in Ethiopia.
Oh my!
And all the teams that weren't successful, they had the opportunity to work to solve a real world humanitarian issue.
Yep.
And that's what we want to drive towards. We want kids who, it's never been easier to change the world. People can do it with an iDisciple app subscription, right?
Yes,
I mean, come on.
Yeah. Absolutely.
This is the coolest time to be alive.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, to that point, can you maybe give our listeners some thoughts on how they can get involved with Ignite or with WASH or whatever?
Yeah, thank you. Well, definitely for WASH, continue to support Giving Company and iDisciple.
Yay!
Absolutely incredible partners. So you should feel good about your subscription and participation with this group. They're pretty cool people. Hey. If you want to learn more about World Vision, you can go to worldvision.org and read up on what we're doing. All of it's there. Yeah. And then Ignite is just worldvision.org/ignite. And it's growing. We are trying to expand into opportunities for homeschool parents, opportunities for clubs at public schools if teachers want to get involved. But it's young still, so we're growing.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Great.
Before we go, Dan, I want to chat about our time in Ethiopia just for a few more minutes. So I lost my luggage when we landed Sunday morning in Addis. Mm-hmm. I had no luggage. It went to Madagascar. I didn't get it till Wednesday, so I survived most of the trip on one set of clothes.
You made the best of it, though. I gotta give it to you. Like that, if that would have happened to somebody else on the trip, I don't know if they would have handled it as well as you did.
I would have been on the floor crying. Yeah, David, I wouldn't have left the hotel.
2 sets of clothes. I went and bought another set.
David did a good job of just laughing that off. I respected it. I liked it.
Give our listeners. I always talk up how you got to cut the bread with the Interfaith Forum. Give a couple other highlights of the trip from your perspective.
When we visited the kids' school, when we visited anyone, the reaction to my tattoos was really cool.
Yes, that's true.
Especially like the kids.
You were
out.
A celebrity at the school.
I was. Yeah, it was. They were going nuts over that. It was cool. Like especially when we went out into some of the, I guess I don't know, like tribal areas. Like the people with there had tattoos, so like seeing their tattoos and then them seeing mine, that was cool. That was a connection. The farm was awesome. The farm was breathtaking. Like,
yeah.
Even though we're going to an impoverished country, the views were amazing. Like, like the scenery, you couldn't ask for like a cooler scene just driving around in the mountains. That was beautiful. The food, just, not being too scared to try some things, even though they told me not to, or, just.
What was the food that we had? Tibs?
A lot of Tibs. Yep. Man, the drivers, just like the locals that were working around with World Vision that had been hired, in the community, they were so cool. Like, I love those guys. Like, I'm friends with them on Facebook now. Like, they were just good guys. And I got to see a little part of me and the people over there. It's like, oh, this is probably what I'd be doing if I lived over here. If I grew up over here, I'd probably be with these guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I loved the trip. It was awesome. I would go back in a second. Yeah.
What about you from that trip?
Oh, gosh. The farmer was a before-after moment for me. So
Yeah.
I always have the agenda, and like I told you guys, we'll never know what the agenda is until we land back in the United States and we've lived it. Then we'll know what it was supposed to be. But it ran pretty seamlessly, I think, when we were in country. And driving into that area, the landscape was strikingly different than anywhere we had been, right? Mm-hmm. It had been completely arid everywhere else. The wind farm was interesting that we passed, but everything was, the sand color and the stones and the landscape. And then we get to this area and it's lush and green.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize this is so dumb. I didn't figure it out. I should have figured it out. And we're going to see this farmer who was a leader, right? Like you mentioned. And as he had joined up in partnership with World Vision, we work with communities for about 15 years. And what makes World Vision a little bit distinctive as a Christian organization is that we have an exit strategy. We work with communities until they're self-sufficient, and then we move and work somewhere else.
Yep.
And so part of that is empowering those who do great work to help their neighbors. And so he was a model farmer. And his role was to educate 12 others after he, got his seeds to start and learned some innovative farming techniques. And so then it all made sense on the way out because we passed farm after farm with these irrigation systems and this lush landscape. And we were like, oh, right. This is also the impact and influence rippling through.
Yeah.
And you could physically see it. Yeah. And that's pretty cool. Yeah.
That was, and I had forgotten about that takeaway for me, but I came back a little bit frustrated, and I would imagine there are a number of African countries that would fit into this general description, which is there's a lot of opportunity. There are a lot of resources. Ethiopia has great coffee. Ethiopia has vast, green, lush lands. And because of things that are broken, like we've talked about, Ethiopia is not doing as well as it could, and on the one hand, I was frustrated, like there's so much more that could be done. And then on the other hand, I was hopeful. I was like, wait a minute, we've seen a lot of desolation, but we've seen a lot of opportunity and a lot of growth and a lot of hope.
Absolutely. It is, in the Hole in Our Gospel, Rich Stearns quotes someone, I don't remember who, unfortunately, who said, a lot of people think that the poor are lazy, the materially poor, I have to clarify. Any lazy poor don't survive. Yeah. These people, the ones who are out there grinding it out, right? Man, they are not just the survivors, but they have something and do something more than I've ever even had the chance to, and that's powerful. Yeah. And so there's potential there, and it's good, and I think God's going to continue to move in these places, and we have a lot to learn from them.
Yeah, that's good.
Nice.
Well, we just funded one more thing on water. We just funded a water point in Kenya.
Ooh.
And talking with Mike Gillespie, our now relationship manager at World Vision, we're going to continue down this path of, I think, funding water points in Kenya. So Dan, I'm hoping Kenya is on our future horizon, right?
Let's go. You don't even have to wonder with me. I'll go. You don't even have
Dan
to
and I tend to be two of the more adventurous here at Giving Company. We'll sign up for all of it.
Let's go see what's going on in this corner of the world. I'm ready. Totally ready.
Well, Marianne, if you don't mind, as we close, I think you know how much Giving Company appreciates you and your spirit and how you worked with us and this $325,000, that's 6,500 people now in sub-Saharan Africa that have access to clean water and a new water point in Kenya. You have just been such a significant part of this organization, frankly, of my journey. And I think if you wouldn't mind, if you could maybe give a little bit of wisdom or a little bit of encouragement to our listeners about your perspective of what it means to be a good Samaritan and how can they maybe live that out a little bit more in ways that would make a difference.
Mm-hmm. That's an important question. Thank you. Thank you, first of all, for having me and for allowing me to be part of the story God's writing in your life. I think being a good Samaritan is something we're never going to figure out and accomplish. It's being, first and foremost, attentive to the Holy Spirit and to where He's calling us.
Yeah.
I know that even for myself, things make sense to me at World Vision. I know how you can engage. We've got, financial amounts that you can give that will make X amount of impact. We can verify that. That's all nice and easy, but in a sense. But there are those moments that God puts someone in your path that you need to slow down just a little bit to recognize. Mm-hmm. To recognize, John Piper said, we don't get to choose our neighbors. And these are the situations that we really have to be aware of, and it can challenge things that we don't often want to talk about, right? And I've found that just having a friend or someone who can encourage me in that has been really helpful for me. And Sean is, honestly, it's my husband. Often, I'm the one with the job at the Christian Humanitarian Aid Organization, but he's the one that encourages me to take a step when I'm unsure of a situation. And I can imagine in this scripture, man, what and in the parable, what was going through his mind? What was this going to cost him? Where did he have to be? These are all the questions that go through my mind. Was something going to happen to him? Was this a setup, like coming from Miami? Those are the questions I ask myself.
Right. That's right.
I'm always like, I have this weird childhood thing about being on guard because of things that happened growing up. And so a mom and a 12-year-old kid came up to us in a parking lot a couple weeks ago, and we're new to our area, and they had been talking to another car who just sort of drove away and didn't say anything to them, and they came up to us and they said, "Excuse me, we need a couple dollars for our motel tonight." And I've given money to people who I'm sure weren't telling the truth before. And I said, "Oh, okay, well, where are you staying?" Just to try to build a little bit of a relationship here. And they named the motel, and I looked it up on my phone, and it was there. And I was like, "That's kind of far from here." And they said, "Yeah, we're in the area just looking for work, any day labor we can do, but we didn't find anything." And I was like, "Well, how much is it?" And she said, It's $55. And so I went to call, and the boy, his name is George, he said, "They won't take your money over the phone. They just won't." And so I didn't even bother. So I walk over to Sean, who's in the car, and I said that they want money for a hotel for the night, for a motel that they're at. And he's like, "Well, give it to them."
Yeah.
I was like, "Right, okay."
Yeah.
And so I asked the lady her name, and she said her name was Sheila. And so we got to talking, and then the little boy, he's 12 years old. He was so bright, so sharp, because when you're living that kind of life, you have to learn to hustle a little bit. You've got to learn how to talk to people fast and to get their attention. And so he said, "We just missed our bus. That was the last bus. Can you give us a ride?" And I'm living the cut all costs, and we work on our car, right? So I was like, this car is not going to make it to Jacksonville. I know that right now. And he's like, well, can you call us an Uber? And I was like, well, I could do that. I could call you an Uber. So it was this progression, and then she asked me if they could get some food because they didn't have any food. And so I'm just talking to him, and I'm like, where do you go to school? And then I knew he's like, well, I only go 3 days a week because of COVID. I don't have to go. They don't run school all week. I'm like, yes, they do. Yeah. Not true. All right, sweetie. Yeah. Anyways, I asked her, I said, have you tried any of the churches? So again, we're new to the area, and I am still getting my bearings. And she said, they don't, sometimes they're just mean. And at the best, they'll give you a pamphlet. And I had this gut-wrenching moment. As someone who's been in this space for so long, I did not know what to tell her. I didn't know where to refer her to. I knew my church, we have a food bank, and we've got classes and a place you can get a wardrobe to go do interviews. But in COVID, it's pretty shut down, and that's not even where she lives. She's not going to take the bus all the way back down to my church. And I didn't even know who to tell her to talk to. I was so mad with myself, and I was like, all right, I need to know this. And I would say that's one thing you can do is know your community, know these resources, and not just in name, but really dig. So I got myself connected to a couple different local organizations, and it's a question that I'm asking myself now: how do I get more involved? Am I stewarding my time well? Am I looking out for these moments? And then Sean has been a big help to me in not doing that childhood thing of wondering what the scam is here, what's happening, and just doing what God's asking us to do. So I know that was super long-winded.
No, love it.
But being attentive to the Spirit. Yeah.
MaryAnn Osborn, Dan.
Thank
World
you for
Vision,
joining us.
9 years. Family Christian, 10 years.
Yeah.
Grew up in South Florida. Having a huge impact around the world.
Amazing.
Outstanding. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Maybe next time we won't have to wear masks when we have MaryAnn back. That is it for today, everyone. This is David Hendrickson with my very special co-host,
Dan Riveros.
and very special guest, MaryAnn Osborn, on the Walking Through Samaria podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time.
See you guys.
For more content like this, visit us at givingcompany.com. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Walking Through Samaria.